Great defeaters, new and old. Welcome back to another, gonna be a very short episode of the breakdown with your host, BaseDaKID and Tony Pugilistboy. We are children of the game. Normally, I'd ask Tony how he's doing, but I can see he's trying to upload something at the moment, and yeah, there's going to be a bit of a reverb and echo in that. So we will forget that one for the time being. Just want to say thank you to everyone who's in the stream at the moment. So do a quick roll call. Bigsy Biggs, bless up to you. Fight Fan TV Live, bless up. Untraceable, hardest working guy on X, Dan the man. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, Philip Ansel, always ever present as always. And I can see who's this, Mr. KWX Ben 1966. New name to me, but hopefully this isn't the first time you see in the show. Thank you very much for tuning in. Um, I guess while Tony's doing what he's doing, if anyone wants to, if there's any questions you guys have got, I guess maybe for this upcoming week, put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them over sort of the next 5 minutes or so, maybe less than that. And yeah, as soon as Tony is ready, we will get everything up and running, and we're definitely looking to be out of here fairly soon. For those of you who were on Undefeated yesterday, so I did say that we was trying to get uh, a guest on who had said that they were happy to sort of come on the show, but it's been radio silence ever since, unfortunately. Now that could be because they're in transit. I have actually heard a potential that this international heavyweight could very well be on the card that was taking place or that's due to take place in Saudi Arabia on the 23rd of December. But when I spoke to them very briefly, they didn't confirm or deny whether or not that was happening. So yeah, that could be a reason why I haven't been able to get hold of them as of late. But it is what it is. It's a good thing the show itself isn't predicated on being having guests and having those conversations. Otherwise, we may very well have been shut down a little while ago. But with that being said, let's take through on the chat. So James Douglas, thanks for showing up, and Daniel J. Boateng as well. Right, so let's see. Good on Arthur for taking the fight. Um, right, who's this in regards to this? Lyndon. Oh, Lyndon Arthur. I'm assuming this must be Arthur getting the shot at Bivol next. Okay. Um, I would have preferred Richard Rivera, to be honest, but I mean, yeah, good on Lyndon, and I guess that keeps him away from Craig Richards. So it's interesting. Um, I guess we'll get a confirmation of that one tomorrow. Um, yeah, all right. Okay, Tony, you seem like you're back now. How are things?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. It was as you mentioned, it was a quiet weekend for boxing. I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't even about to watch boxing. So I'm kind of catching up myself, but I've done my little bit of digging in and found a few bits and pieces. So I have uploaded some footage. Um, let's see how we got on. It's gonna be a short
I'm
show.
I'm gonna be real. I don't even think that was needed. I think it would have just been a lot easier to forego that and just have a conversation this week. But we appreciate it as always. What I will do, I'll let you sort of start off just with the Eubank fight because obviously there's a bit more, I guess, of your error within that context. So yeah, just give us a basic overall thoughts and then we'll kind of just talk it through from there.
Give me 1 minute.
Okay, so that gets you. All right. Okay. Um, Go on mute for us quick then. All right, lovely. So with regards to this fight, now I watched I had missed the first 2 rounds when I was watching this as I was in transit, but I was watching the fight overall. One thing I saw is that Harlem Eubank for me while watching it seemed to be a bit more of a he seemed to be a lot more proactive. That's how I want to say it. Not necessarily in terms of his punch output, but in the way that he was looking to play shots and sort of find his angles and find his trajectory to take on Timo Schwarzkopf. It seemed very much like he was thinking a lot more in this fight compared to how I've seen him in some previous others. Now, obviously, as always, you do have to sometimes take some shots. You've got to give them back. One thing I have noticed about Harlem, and obviously this may not necessarily be um, his an issue with him. This may just be uh, due to matchmaking, but he's very. I haven't actually seen him in thus far with any punches. There's a lot of fighters who you don't often see in with big punches, but at the stage where he's at now, that's just something. It's almost like for me just a highlight. There's no one that I've seen in fight has really ever had a really big KO percentage or even sort of like above 50%. So while that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't punch, it's just something that I'd be curious to sort of understand. His use of the shoulder roll, I feel like shouldn't I feel like it probably that style itself doesn't lend it very well to him, keeping sort of that um keeping his lead hand low, arcing in that shell. I don't really think he's got the right body construct for that personally, in my opinion, and it does leave him to sort of get caught, especially when he's sort of stepping into range, into the pocket. But as you can see from this fight, while he's never been like the biggest of punchers, a lot of his KOs have come in his more recent bouts. So, or a lot of the good ones anyway. So it looks like he's definitely been working on, sort of on that punch power and things of that nature. And obviously, as you can see in that very last still there, you had Mr. Senior basically saying that he's wafer thin at 140 pounds and he needs to move up to 147 immediately. And as soon as he does that, he should then be fighting Conor Ben rather than Chris Eubank Jr. taking on that challenge. Um, but yeah, overall, it was a good performance from him. I did have it by the decision, so when he got that stoppage in the 11th, I was surprised, but overall, it was a fairly competent performance, and I look forward to seeing what he does do next. But if he does go up to 147, I feel as if that outside of maybe a Conor Ben fight, I'm not sure what else he can really get done there. But hey, I mean, it'll be interesting while it takes place. Tony, feel free, whatever you thought about it, let us know.
So my thoughts are, Harlem Eubanks is limited. I was trying to think of the right word. Um, he's one of those that I would put in a category with the likes of Johnny Fisher. Reason is they're great in the gym. Then they're going to work hard. They can work their butts off. They will get in and amongst with all the top boys in sparring. They will give it their best. But when it comes down to the final hurdle of getting in the squared circle with top level elite fighters, they will get found wanting. Um, you know, I saw some good things in that fight. In the bits that I saw some things that made me think, well, against better opposition, you're gonna get found out. Particularly with relation to hand placement. You mentioned it, the Philly shell for him. I think he's going to get found out at some point, especially with harder hitters or more technically gifted boxers. So much though he's a very entertaining fighter, obviously Wasserman are taking advantage of the fact that This is a household name. We can utilize this. We can show it on a Friday on free TV. And it's entertaining. You know, Timo Schwarzkopf is the type of opponent that gave his all. You know, he was in that fight and he made it a competitive, entertaining fight, which is what you want on free TV. You want, you know, people who are casuals who don't want to pay money for subscription boxing to be able to be entertained. And on that basis, it was a half decent card. I do have a little reference to Leron Richards, who was on the undercard. You know, a new name for Wasserman. I thought, again, you know, decent name to have on a Friday night on free TV. So overall, I think it was a good card, decent enough for, you know, the platform it was on. I do feel that Harlem Eubanks at some point will get found out. Unfortunately, you know, I'm not seeing sufficient progress to make me think that he's going to be able to mix it with the elite, especially now that he's going to be going up to 147 as per his dad, his uncle, excuse me.
Okay, I mean, yeah, pretty much that seems very succinct. Can't argue, can't even debate that. We'll just have to wait and see. But as with all of these guys, especially these up and comers, the ones that we know of, and the ones that maybe we do have past history with in any shape or form. Good luck to Harlem, and I hope that he is successful in whatever he does do moving forward. And if he does have any setbacks, let's see how we adjust to them. But that's all for the future. Right now, next one. Let's talk about Ewan McKenzie and Ishmael Davis. Now this fight for me was probably my favorite fight of the weekend. Again, I didn't watch any fight overall, like all the way through. Well, no, that's a lie. I did, but I wasn't studying fights for this weekend. It was just one of those ones where, um, yeah, it was one of those ones where it wasn't really worth my sort of undivided attention, I will say. But there were some good entertaining fights. Now, Ewan McKenzie and Ishmael Davis, the first thing that I noticed in this fight was number one, how well Ishmael Davis switched stances, which sometimes is a very much a pet peeve of a lot of people, especially when you just sort of do it consistently. But he never did it at this against the run of play or at the sake of form. It was always very compact. His punch selection, his movement, his footwork, and even his defense for the majority of the time was extremely fluid, and I was really enjoying watching his work. Um, the one issue I did have is that I felt his punch output caused him to lose certain rounds that maybe he shouldn't have actually lost, just um based on the narrative of the round or the effect of the round. He might have come in with like two or three or four really good shots, but he was just getting outworked like 4 or 5 shots to one. And when it's that kind of metric, unless you knock the person down, it doesn't matter how sort of how strong your shots are, you are going to lose that round because your activity isn't so much your dominance in terms of your shot selection isn't that much um of an overpowering force as opposed to the activity. Like you can't win a round with 4 power shots against someone that's landed 20 jabs and power shots. It just the ratio just doesn't work. Like I said, unless you knock them down or have them wobbling with every single shot that you throw, and even then it's still a bit techie. That being said, he I liked his shot selection was almost always on point. There was times when he was waiting for the uppercut, which is like he should have been throwing that uppercut a lot sooner. Because had he have been throwing that uppercut, I feel that Ewan McGregor probably would have actually, um, he would have maybe hit the deck because there were several times he was falling over his front foot or he was trying to dip underneath a sweeping hook or a jab. But in order for him to do that, he was bending at the waist and falling over that foot, and the uppercut was there. And Ishmael Davis wasn't necessarily just taking those opportunities. But that being said, it was for me a very good performance from him. He busted up Ewan. Um, he busted up his eye from his nose. Sorry, he tore up his nose from the very first round, and he busted up his eye from round two. And I even put on Twitter, it looked like McKenzie had been in a 12 round war after just 2 rounds, and that just said to me, this fight itself isn't gonna, it's not going to last and not going to end very well for him. Again, on my predictions league, I did pick Davis to win the fight, although I did pick it um, by decision, and I think it was an 8 rounder, if I can remember correctly. And he got stopped in the eighth, for the towel came in. It might have been a 10. I might be wrong on that one, but I remember I was thinking to myself, oh, why did they throw the towel in when it's like right towards the end of it was like a minute left, and he was still sort of there. But I get it. You keep him, you stop him from taking additional damage. Um, but one thing I will give you and McKenzie is he had good activity, and he kept trying throughout. He didn't have any quitting him. He didn't look for a way out. He didn't sort of look to his team to, yeah, get me out of here. Like he stuck in there, and every round he was still trying to win, even though it like the momentum was just slipping away from him, and even to the point where he picked up some of those rounds in the middle where Ishmael Davis's output started to drop, whether that was due to slight tiredness or maybe him just taking the rounds off to sort of wear down McKenzie a bit more. Not sure, but yeah, overall it was a really good performance from Ishmael Davis, and I do look forward to seeing his next fight. Tony, what did you think of that one?
So I'll be honest, I didn't see the whole fight. Got some highlights as you saw. Literally just saw a very what looked like a polished performance from the super welterweight Ishmael Davis. Um, he was up against another unbeaten fighter because Ewan McKenzie was 8-0 before this fight. So when you got two fighters who are unbeaten, neither man wants to lose that unbeaten record. So there is always a little bit of danger. You're not really 100% certain on how a fight might end up, but from what I could see, looked like Ishmael had this fight well in control. As you said, switch hitter, looks like he's got some decent power. The face of Ewan was very badly damaged, so I could understand why the corner threw the towel in. Um, it was, what was it, a 10 rounder? So he had two more rounds left to go. The corner obviously thought that he was unable to continue and win the fight in those last 2 rounds, so they called a day to it and let him fight on another day. But yeah, we saw the clips. Ishmael, moving in, great use of uppercut, getting himself right in the kill zone for those short shots, the hooks, uppercuts. Somewhat Tyson-esque in his dispatch of Ewan McKenzie. So look, I didn't know too much about Ishmael Davis coming into this fight. I mean, maybe you can put a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of this Leeds fighter, in terms of where you might see him going from now. His trajectory.
No, I can't say I've seen a lot of him. I'd heard his name a couple of times. What I will say, I think that it's all right, and this might be one of those ones where people say, "Oh, it's probably But when you look at the actual style, he kind of reminded me a little bit of like Terence Crawford, and a little bit like Boots Ennis, just in the way that he was not even just the switching, but even just the way he was setting up and the way that the shots were, the way he was picking his shots, it looked very much like he was in that school. So obviously, I don't say that in terms of their talent levels or their proficiency, but I got that when I was watching him, especially in the first few rounds. I'm thinking there's a little Terence Crawford esque here. I could imagine that he's probably someone that he's looked at and has definitely maybe taken some pointers from in the past. But no, I mean, in terms of his trajectory, I mean, I think Troy Williamson is still at 154 unless he's gone to 160. Josh Kelly's there. Maybe you can see if they can do a Wasserman v Matchroom or something like that. I don't know if he's officially signed to Matchroom. He's probably a free agent, but he looks like he will get back out on another card. I could see him sort of taking on one of those type of guys next and just see where we go. I think that was for the English, or it was an eliminator for the English title. So why not try and sort of step up to one of those guys, or I guess get that English title in his next bout.
Cool, yeah. I mean, look, we're always trying to see where we can find new talent, and when we see a name or we see a boxer who displays those kind of skills, be sure that's a name to look out for. If you haven't seen him before, guys, keep your eyes peeled for Ishmael Davis. So let's move on to the next one.
Now this is the fight that I think it was an 8 rounder, and it probably the corner waved it off. I think it was the corner that waved it off, and it was like a minute or so left to go in it. Now this is um what was it? Callum French versus John Ofori.
Jeff,
His
Jeff Ofori.
is it Jeff Ofori? Sorry. Right. So Jeff Ofori was 13-5-2, and Callum French was 4-0. But Callum, this is like his first. This was his second fight in like 17 months. So he'd had almost a year and a half layoff prior to his previous fight, and this is sort of like the next fight in since then. I don't know the reason for that, but the first couple rounds he actually done very well in terms of just boxing and managing the range. But fighting obviously Jeff, who is he's a 20 fight pro, he's a sort of a 20 fight pro at this point. He definitely sort of knew that he had sort of that grit and that toughness. Now, the one thing I did like, because in the first 2 rounds, Callum French was um he was basically controlling range, and he was using and sort of he was battling against the distance. But then what Jeff sort of switched onto towards like the end of the second, and then sort of picked it up from there through the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, going up until the eighth, is he started, rather than trying to box with Callum, trying to measure him with the jab, he started throwing and launching the backhand first for Callum to have to worry about the backhand, and then he was coming, and then he was basically hitting him with a 2-1 instead of a 1-2. He was throwing and launching the right hand out there, and if it missed or didn't connect, then the jab hand would come after it, or it would be a hook from the left hand side that he was sweeping with. And all he kept doing was he just kept doing that and kept staying close to Callum, not allowing him any room to sort of try and reset a maneuver. And whether it was the time out of the ring, or whether it was just the perfect adjustment by Jeff Ofori, he done exactly what he needed to do, and just got to a point where he wasn't he was just, I guess, just catching lever for he was hitting the target all night. Callum French looked like he was visibly tired after 4 rounds, and then so for the next three and a half before it got stopped, he was just taking punishment. Yeah, his face wasn't overly battered and bruised. Jeff probably doesn't hit the hardest, but it looks like he hit enough to wear him down, to hurt him. And yeah, and then Callum just sort of resorted to holding in the back half of the fight, sort of trying to get little spells of a of a breather here and there, but it just didn't work because Jeff just had the engine, and he just would not allow that separation of space, and there was nothing Callum could do to create it. And ultimately, The corner threw in the towel. I think, like I said, about 45 seconds, to 90 seconds just before the end of the eighth when it would have finished. But I think ultimately at that point, Jeff was ahead, and I think it would have been a points loss for Callum anyway. So they probably thought, well, there's no point taking an extra 90 seconds worth of punches when we already know that we've lost this. So let's regroup and come back another day. Um, that's all my thoughts. What did you think?
So yeah, I mean, pretty much in line with what you've just said. Look, Callum French was 4-0 going into this fight, so he's clearly the upside of this matchup. And you can see that with the record that Jeff Ofori's got, that he's not really expected to win. I don't think anyway. With a 13-5-2 record, or was a 12-5-2 record, with only 4 KOs in those 12 wins, and having been knocked out 3 times out of the 5 losses, this definitely for me was a case of, Callum French getting a sort of semi-journeyman that he could utilize his skills against and get a win to take him up to 5-0. But Jeff Ofori is one of those guys that clearly, takes this game seriously. He's got a winning record, which is always a good thing. And he was able to identify ways in which he could counter the best of what Callum had to offer. Now, didn't hear any interviews at the end. Wasn't capable of seeing whether Callum French thought that look, this wasn't the right night for me. Sometimes a fighter goes into a fight, he's feeling not at his best and effectively, doesn't perform. That's going to be the story of the next fight we're going to talk about. But in this particular fight, not sure if it was just underperforming by French or overperforming by Ofori. But you could
I
see
think it was
from
a
the
bit of
clip.
both. So I think it was a bit
Okay,
of both. And there were no interviews. Anyone who lost weren't interviewed afterwards, on the broadcast or even on the Matchroom channel. So we only ever heard the comments of the winners in the fights.
cool. Okay. So yeah, look, onwards and upwards. We'll I'm sure Callum will be back. He's only a novice really in this game. Ofori goes on, and we see how he gets matched up again. But this is not in any way a coming out party for Jeffy Ofori. Um, you know, will we see him on TV again? Hopefully, yeah. You want every fighter to get a little bit of glory. He's got a little 15 minutes of fame. Might get another decent matchup in his next fight. But as far as I'm concerned, nice entertainment on the night, but nothing to write home about. Nobody in these two guys is going to be material worthy of anything worth talking about. To be honest.
Yeah, so Michael says Jeff Ofori is a tough guy, dedicated and decent fighter. One of his losses was to O'Hara Davis at a weight he shouldn't have been at. Now, yeah, I think this fight was taking place at 150. What was it? Does it say on the?
Yeah, it's 138.
Okay,
Before it was 138, French 137 3/4.
right. So I'm assuming then, if that's the case, this fight would have been technically a lightweight fight, with them having to obviously cut weight for when they go into title contentions. Um, so I'm just wondering because obviously, O'Hara Davis fights at 140. Um, so when Mike saying that he fought a weight he should, I can't remember the fight, so I can't remember what weight that was, and unless that was maybe that 147 or something, and he should have never been up there, then interesting. Mike, if you can leave that in the comments what you meant by that, that'd be appreciated because I don't remember that situation myself. Uh, okay, and then So Philip Answer says, "What's the difference between hard tests and being moved too quickly?" So, um, my interpretation of that, Philip, is that when you have a hard test, it's like basically your team know that you're ready for this level of fight, but in that there's things that in this fight that maybe you haven't dealt with yet, that they're basically building, they're sort of putting building blocks on top of your foundation to make sure that you've got the necessary skills when you get up to like world level. Um, so you're in there with someone that's gonna push you, is gonna be hard and competitive, but you should quite easily come through that. Um, and to me, the difference between that and being moved too quickly is when you're put into a situation, usually via money, um, or maybe like you've been, it's demanded that you do so, whereby you haven't had the necessary building fights for that opportunity to take place. So to me, the best example of that would be Anthony Yard against Sergey Kovalev. That's being moved too quickly because there was nothing done beforehand, which would say that the building blocks were put in there to deal with a situation like that, and then ultimately you can move that even towards the better BF fight, although he was a bit more prepared for that one, but just still not to the necessary level. So to me, that's kind of the difference between a hard test and being moved too quickly. One is it's gonna be it's gonna be sort of a hard fight or things that you're gonna have to figure out, but it's coming at the time when you know that you've had the necessary implementation. But then yeah, being moved too quickly is taking fights that you've not had any real preparation for prior, and maybe just taking it on vibes or because the pay is too good to go, or you're being threatened with being not kicked off the roster if you don't take that fight, kind of thing. That would be my opinion. What about you, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much bang on exactly what you said, and I think the example of Anthony Yard was bang on the atypical situation where a guy hadn't been prepared in a necessary way to take on the level of opponent which he was launched into. So yeah.
Okay, big up to Jam Down. Obviously, I'm not sure if you've been watching from the start. You just passed in, but always happy to see you on the channel. Thank you very much. All right, Tony. Main event. Let's go. Kick it off for us, and yeah, we can let everyone be on their merry way.
Okay, so right, Shabazz Masood versus Jose San Martin. Just pull up my info. This got a little bit heated at the weigh-in. Masood was definitely giving it the big one, and making out like he was something mightier than he actually was. Obviously, San Martin has had a foray in the UK before, but this fight, to me, looking at again, you can see. This is interesting that the clip we're seeing at the moment were decent hard shots from Masood, but there's fallibilities about the game. And in a post fight interview that was done with Masood and his trainer Ben Davidson, they both mentioned how they basically didn't perform well and that the game plan wasn't followed the way it should have done. The fallibilities are he lacks a jab. I mean, he's literally pouring the whole time. In fact, he's either pouring or he's using the forearm to manage where San Martin is in the ring, and he gets called up several times by the referee for using the forearm. He doesn't use his leverage in his feet and his waist when he's throwing punches. So a lot of his punches are just arm punches. As I said, when I was watching a little bit of that clip, you do see some heavy shots or what appear to be heavy shots. I don't think they actually carry a huge amount of power. But throughout most of that fight, a lot of his shots are just arm punches. So he's using like a stiff arm to kind of fight to place San Martin into a position where he can throw a straight right into either the body or the head of San Martin, but he is really not putting any decent leverage into any of his shots. And San Martin effectively just walks through most of that and delivers his more concussive punches, which he throws at short range. So what you have here is the pressure fighter is San Martin. You've got what is the boxer puncher, or more so boxer than puncher, in Masood, who's trying to negate the ferocious nature of San Martin by picking away at his shots. But what he's not doing is backing up San Martin. In fact, San Martin, through most of this fight, is backing up Masood onto the ropes and then effectively using his short range attacks of hooks and uppercuts to negate the work of Masood. Now, as far as the scorecard is concerned, this was a majority decision for Masood. 2 judges saw it by way of Masood. 1 judge saw it by way of San Martin. I personally probably would have given it a draw. You could have had a couple of rounds which could have been swing rounds. There was one specific scorecard which was a little bit harsh to San Martin, but overall I thought this was pretty much an even 5-5 sort of contest. I didn't think that either fighter had done enough winning this, but obviously, you know, it swings and roundabouts in a subjective sport. But, you know, look, Masood gets the decision. He's displeased with his own performance. I didn't think he did anything to make me think, like, you know, you won this fight. As I said, I give it a draw myself. We go on and we see where Masood goes from here. But, you know, he's got a lot of work to do. He's obviously affected by the fact that he's been out of the ring for over a year now since his last fight. But, yeah, he really needs to get active and get back into the groove if he's going to want to, you know, do anything in this game. So, yeah, that's how I saw it.
Do you know, a lot was made of the year's inactivity, and that in itself can play a part if you're worried about your timing, or sort of not, or not being quick enough to the draw, or maybe not having the engine to sort of go the rounds. I actually think in terms of this fight though, that whole a year out of the ring thing was a cop out, because number one, his style and his general fight, his fighting style is not the type of style whereby, okay, yeah, your timing can be affected, but ultimately you're a box and move type of guy. You're not a person that's sitting in the pocket like waiting to counter punch, and that's normally where your timing needs to be razor sharp and your reflexes. He could quite easily get any of his rhythm back while sort of just going through the rounds. The issue here is that he has no power, and that issue is when you're fighting a pressure fight, especially one that's got as many knockouts as San Martin is. Ultimately, you don't have any way to deter him or to cut his work rate in half. Yeah, you might be able to spin him a couple times on the spot, be able to get around him, and maybe create an angle or two here or there. But from you don't have enough to really offset him and make him worried about coming in and collapsing that pocket. It's just going to be a hard night's work for you. It was always going to be a hard night's work for him. And even even Ben Davison said that at the end of the fight. He said, to be fair to Shabazz, we had another opponent that we were going to be taking on, but we knew that stylistically this was the much harder fight. And that's clear because, again, unless you've either got the power to keep the person off of you, the footwork and the stamina to be able to do the job all night for 12 rounds without having to take a break, or you've got a supreme height and reach advantage where you can literally just keep them on the end of a stick and catch them with that backhand every time they pop in. You're always going to be in problems. And Masood thinking that he was just going to sit on the ropes or try and get to the ropes to take breathers and then just tuck up and maybe try and counter punch, he quickly found out that that wasn't the tactic that was going to work, and that's ultimately what caused him to give up so many of those rounds, sitting on the inside trying to take breathers because he's so tired of having to keep moving around the ring because he can't keep this guy off of him in the center. Whenever he took center ring, he was doing well. Every time he got pushed and backed up and bullied on, I did look and see, okay, I can kind of see Masood doing better work for 5 or 6 of the rounds. So even if you put maybe a swing in there, it likely would have been, yeah, it would have kind of gone Masood's way, and he was the home fighter, so he was generally going to get consideration because San Martin just wasn't busting him up enough that it was that visible. Now, then when we get to that scorecard, which was 98-92 for Shabazz Masood, I mean, that is the scorecard where people say, all right, even if you won the fight, that's why we think there's corruption and conspiracy taking place, because there's no way anyone can look at that fight and say that he clearly won 8 rounds. Even if you say, okay, well, yeah, but even if like there's a bunch of close swing rounds in there, there's no way that he won every single one of the swing rounds as well, because you can tell probably San Martin has done enough in, I would say, 2 of those swing rounds at very minimum to say that yes, he would deserve at least 4 rounds on any card. Um, I don't think there was 5 clear and obvious rounds to give Masood. So to be able to say that you gave him 8, yeah, it just, that's where you say to yourself, that's when people need to be put in front of a panel and a commission being asked to explain their scorecards. Um, but outside of that, look, I think he did just about enough to win, but it wasn't a great performance. And as far as Matchroom debuts go, or debuts for anyone, I mean, the only way it could have been worse is to get knocked out in your debut fight, or I guess to maybe lose a unanimous decision the other way. And except for if it's a 4 rounder, then sometimes you kind of get away with it. But yeah, if you was on a 6 or a 8 round debut and you get beat, that's probably the worst possible thing that can happen to you. But in terms of coming onto a big platform, speaking with your chest and then being put as the main event of a card. Now, granted, he wasn't supposed to be. He was supposed to fight 3 weeks earlier. He got ill on weigh-in day, so because I think the Ritz and McCormack fight fell off for this one, he got moved to the main event. So it wasn't necessarily his choice, but that being said, you've just announced yourself to the worldwide public, and yeah, you haven't done so with much glory. So hopefully he comes back very, very soon. Uh, Within a couple months, I would say be back out by January, February, the very latest, and just to sort of like try and get that dominant win and then get out active another 2 or 3 times next year. If possible, have 4 fights, just try and wash away the maybe the stench of this performance. So to the point where people forget about it in sort of the next couple times you're out there. That'd be my opinion. But yeah, overall it wasn't great. And he he's got more to do to be ready for people in the future. Uh, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it, Tony. So unless you got anything
Mhm.
sort of to add to that.
Yes, so thanks, Rosie Mason, for correcting my grammar, because yeah, that was a split decision, not a majority decision. Absolutely correct. Um, just going through some of the comments, make sure we've touched base with everybody on some of the stuff that they mentioned. Mayweather spent his whole career using his forearms and elbows. He didn't use his whole career, but obviously towards the end of his in the sort of Money Mayweather days, yeah, those forearms became quite the strategic ploy. Rosie says Styles makes fighting. It's very often difficult to predict how Styles will gel. who would have realistically predicted that Junior Jones would have beaten Marco Antonio Barrera not just once but twice? Yes, absolutely.
Rosie knows her stuff.
Yeah.
There's two earlier on that we need to kind of talk about very very quickly, and I say
mhm.
quickly because we do need to kind of get out of here. Um, One of them, obviously, so we're talking about Lyndon Arthur and Dimitri Bivol potentially being the fight that's taking place December 23rd. That should obviously be confirmed tomorrow, so we'll be able to let everyone know. But there's one here saying that Ellis Zorro is supposed to be fighting Jaya Patel on the
Yeah,
23rd.
the whole card has now been unofficially officially announced. So give me a second.
Well, while you're doing that, I mean, so obviously most people know Ellis Zorro is a Lewisham boy like myself, currently lives in Bromley. I was at his last fight. Um, he did okay in the fight, but it wasn't the performance it needed to be kind of as far as I was concerned. I did want to try and speak to him a bit afterwards. I actually didn't realize I'd totally forgotten. He's actually best friends with one of my cousins. So I'd seen him on several occasions at like sort of birthday parties and functions that my cousin used to throw, and just didn't really remember until I saw my cousin at the event and we was talking about it. Now, with that being said, he is nowhere near world level. He's probably at best, as far as I'm concerned, at English level at this point. It's sort of that regional Southern English. Maybe you could say he could potentially be creeping up to British, but he's not there either. So I don't know who suggested this fight. I do not like it for him at all. And I'm very much a realist, especially with people I know, whether I know them or not. I'm not one type of person gonna say, "Oh yeah, I think they can do it," if I really don't. And maybe that means I'm not backing my brethren or whatever. But I have to be honest. I've said it to numerous people that I know when I don't think they can win a fight, and thus far I've never actually been proven wrong. Uh, this is a whoever's if this is the case, like whoever's done this one, yeah, this is the perfect definition of being pushed, being moved too quickly. So, yeah, if that's the case, that fight doesn't last. It doesn't last very long at all. I would say within 3 rounds, if and that's to me as being generous. Um, and that's not something I'd
So
like to say because I really I like Ellis's work rate and I respect what he's done, but that's not the one.
is I'm not sure if there was a comment there about Frank setting up uh, Elisoro. I don't think he's managed by Frank Warren.
No, but he's promoted by Frank.
Oh, okay. So just to confirm, the unofficial card for the undercard of AJ Wallin and Wilder Parker is Dimitri Bivol versus Lyndon Arthur, Jai Opataya versus Ellis Zorro, Philip Hergovich versus Mark Damori, Arslan Bekmambetov versus Ajit Kabayel, Frank Sanchez versus Junior Farr, and Daniel Dubois versus Jarrell Miller.
So did you say it's Hergovich against Mark Damori?
That's correct.
Yeah, you see, and that's the same thing that they've done in the last one, which I have an issue with. At the end of the day, make Hergovich fight Frank Sanchez. Mark Damori's got no business on the card, and neither is Junior Farr. At the end of those are unless you're literally just doing showcase fights to someone to get like a brutal highlight real knockout. Those fights they're not even competitive. Literally, they're not competitive, and there's no need for them. You'd be much better placed, easier place to just take out those two, and then put Frank Sanchez in there with Philip Hergovich instead. But I get obviously not everyone's going to be fighting quote unquote killers, but if you've got Jarrell Miller and Daniel Dubois, how is Philip Hergovich getting Mark Damori? Like who? And that's crazy. Junior
Yeah,
Farr, obviously,
but you
he's
know
not the
what?
worst, but
Yeah, I mean, with the Filip Hrgovic one, you just know he ain't gonna go anywhere near anybody that's gonna upset his place at the top of the ranking for the IBF title. He's definitely just there for appearance money. For, as you mentioned yesterday on the Monday Night Smoke, once the rematch takes place between Usyk and Fury, the IBF belt becomes available for Hrgovic to attain, and obviously the potential of a fight with AJ moves ever closer. So we'll see how that goes.
Maybe so, but Mark Demore is like you would have been better off putting him in against Derek Chisora. Like because Mark Demore is about 4 levels below Derek Chisora. That's
Yeah,
what we're talking about here.
it is. It's a gimme. It's a gimme. Definitely, I agree with
Yeah,
you.
but you can have gimmies with like people that at least have some semblance. You know who would have been a better idea for that fight? That is would still quote unquote be looked at as a gimme. Pulev could have had Hrgovic against Pulev. You could have even had him against Jerry Forrest. That would have been a gimme to a lot of people. But it looks at least it's going to be more competitive. I'll
Yeah.
find out tomorrow. Lord, hopefully I should be there, and I will. Obviously, I'll put certain questions to certain people, but we'll sort of have a look then. But yeah, that one to me just is that's not the right step. All the other fights, so I haven't got any problems with any of those. Well, except for Jai and Ellis, I think that one also crazy mismatch. But I guess I'll see Jai tomorrow as well, so we can chop it up, and I'll see if I get some more content for the channel. Tony, give him your socials. Let's get out of here.
Okay, so you can find me on YouTube and Twitter at Pugilistboy. You can find me on Instagram at Pugilistic Boy.
And as for myself, you can see there, BaseDaKID, the hardcore casual. That's my YouTube channel. Yeah, feel free to go over there. I should hopefully have content, 2 or 3 sets of content from tomorrow. There will actually also be probably maybe 2 basis picks this week because there's way too much to cover in one, and obviously the fights start from Thursday, so there might be one tomorrow night or very early on Thursday, and then another one on Friday for the weekend's action.
We've got boxing tonight as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Where's that?
There is some kind of world title taking place today, because today this is one of them weird weeks where boxing. I think I was watching either Joe Habib or Ring IQ, and they were saying that there's boxing Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday this week.
Okay,
obviously the big card is Thursday with Shakur Stevenson, but I think there is something going on tonight of interest.
well, if there is, it's probably a Marv Nation or something like that. Not sure. But again, I won't really be too worried about that. BaseDaKID on Instagram as well. Don't really go in there for boxing news as such, but you can still find me on there. Or you can type in BaseDaKID on Twitter and I show up, or just B_A_S_E, and that is pretty much me done. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Quicker one this week. Still not as quick as I would have liked it, but hey, that's how we do. We will be back next week. Very bumper show. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and until then, peace.